but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
Welcome to What's the Rush podcast with me, Rebecca Rusch, your host. This is an adventurous space where we get to explore within and without. And on this journey, I'm so lucky to get to welcome mentors, peers, friends, and luminaries who've changed me, but who've also changed the world. Our intention is to go a little deeper into the things that might not be apparent in their public facing persona. So today, what a gift to get to welcome Dr. Alan Lim, or as many people know him, Al. Hi, Al.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Reba.
I want to try something a little different today. Typically, I read a bio of amazing accolades from the guests who come here, but we know each other pretty well. And so I want to try something different. And I just want to turn it over and ask you, who is Dr. Alan Lim? And then who is Al?
Well, I think that the question is really kind of an internal, external one, right? I think that when I think of who I am, I'm very simply just who I am, and I've always just tried to be, someone that tries to go to where the help is needed, someone who is curious, and someone who I think a lot of, what a lot of people see in terms of my accomplishments are things that are basically, really a reflection of very difficult moments in my own life, where if I didn't have a problem to solve, I didn't have a basis for any of the success that I have. And Dr. Lim is really just maybe the external validation that I needed to have so that people would take me seriously. That's basically it. It's a calling card. More than anything. And I think that having been mostly a very, very shy person my entire life, I knew that the only way that I could get people to listen to me is if there was something there that gave me some level of immediate credibility. And that's what my education was about. It was about two things, stoking my own curiosity and wanting to learn, but also realizing that if I didn't have something behind my name, that I was maybe too shy to advocate for myself.
Wow. All right, we're just going right in.
Yeah. Bam. Bam. Also, for people who don't know, I like to also tell people that all my parts are from China, but I was made in the Philippines. I was programmed in Los Angeles, California.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good programming, good genes, and you're at your mom's place in LA right now, right?
I'm at my mom's place in LA. That's right.
Your childhood home.
That's right. I'm in the same bedroom. This is a fake background, by the way, for those who can't tell, but I'm in the same bedroom I grew up in, same bed, same everything. It hasn't really changed.
And the true scientist, you are drinking coffee from a beaker, which actually is pretty great.
You got to know the volume, or you got to know the mass. You got to know one or the other.
Well, let's go back into your science a bit, because you have done a ton of stuff in the world of cycling performance and human performance. You've worked with a ton of Olympic teams, working with and mentoring groups, from 96 and now towards the 2028 Olympics.
Yeah.
And was your studying, when you got into your studying, was it fueled by your own cycling, or fueled by, were you already an athlete in sport? And what curiosity drew you into that?
Yeah. I think that ultimately all of this begins because I was a latchkey kid growing up in Los Angeles, California. And as a latchkey kid, there's no real way to get around LA if you don't have a car. They're not exactly letting 10-year-olds drive around Los Angeles. So, for me and my brother and my cousins, we all found our escape through the bicycle. And unbeknownst to our parents, we were literally roaming the streets of LA on little dirt bikes, and found this real sense of freedom in that ability to go into all these little nooks and crannies of such a complicated city. And, that city always felt like a city that was built on this weird self-segregation of this neighborhood versus that neighborhood. I've heard it said that Los Angeles is 400 neighborhoods all struggling to be one city. And it's pretty true. There is hey, you're this, you're that. I'm from Chinatown. I'm from the east side. You're from the west side. Sorry, we can never talk to each other. And for me, all of that disconnect changed during the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics, where all of a sudden, for 2 weeks, LA got to be this excellent version of itself. This possibility bloomed, and I got to see, these athletes like Alexi Graywall and Connie Carpenter win gold medals in cycling, and inspire this idea that me just roaming around LA on a bicycle could be more than just roaming around LA on a bicycle. It could be something that really broke down the walls of being in between,
How old were you at this time?
probably about 11 years old.
11. Wow.
Yeah. And the 84 Los Angeles Olympics, I remember, before the games, my parents had gotten in a big fight about whether or not they would buy tickets to go see some of the games. And it was decided that we didn't have enough money. We couldn't afford to do so, which was really sad. And my dad ended up going behind my mom's back and buying tickets anyways. And it changed all of our lives. I mean, I remember my mom saying that, she'd never felt like she was so part of something so much bigger than herself. Like, it transformed her, it transformed my dad, it transformed my brother, it transformed me. We were this immigrant family in LA, and all of a sudden we felt like we were part of a real global community. And sport served for us as this, family, as a connection to others. It was meaningful, it was really important. And from that point on, I have what they call in the industry 5-ring fever. I had caught the virus of the Olympic movement and of Olympism. And I think it's misunderstood as this win at any cost kind of endeavor. But the reality is that it is about, mutual understanding. It is about human dignity. It is about how, we can inspire people. And that 1984 Los Angeles Games, I think, changed a whole entire generation that got, so many of, my peers interested in riding. And the legacy of that 84 Los Angeles Games were all of these youth programs in LA. At the velodrome, local time trials, clubs, there was so much volunteerism that bloomed from that. And so as a young kid, it became really easy for me to step into these clubs and be guided by all of these adult mentors outside of my own family for the first time, who taught me about sport and life and cycling. So I fell into this really, really vibrant hub of competitive cycling as a junior through the Montrose cycling team, and decided at that point that I always wanted to be part of this in some way, whether as an athlete or as more. I was a really curious kid. My parents were both, before they came to the United States, educators. My dad taught geology at Beijing University. My mom taught chemistry at Mindanao University in the Philippines, and they taught me a lot about, science, etc. things. And when I wanted to buy a power bar, as a 12-year-old, they would just shake their heads and say, like, we can't afford that. And are you kidding me? And so I would start experimenting with, like, I don't know, canned peaches in a Ziploc bag with honey. Or, I have notes from a training diary from when I was 13 years old, like experimenting with all types of sports drinks, because like we couldn't afford to buy the stuff, that was commercially available. So everything I ate and drank as a kid was a little experiment in the kitchen, and me trying to go faster and reading magazines about performance, but then, figuring out how I could make it myself, because we couldn't afford to buy that stuff. That eventually led me to, wanting to study exercise science and exercise physiology. And eventually I realized that I was a lot better thinking about the sport than I was racing in the sport.
Yeah, there's so much there. I mean, that I can see from your childhood that you've carried throughout your life. And I mean, the big one is just how you saw that sports were a connector for
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
and throughout history, the Olympics and elite level sport is the place where we compete on the playing field, but we're bonded, and the whole world is interested in the outcome of this, not as a war, or
yeah,
not
yeah,
as it, but interested and brought together by witnessing people doing incredible things and trying really hard. And so
yeah,
the connectivity that you learned at 11 and felt, I feel like that has been a real backbone to what you bring, in my experience of you, what you bring to so many athletes, to your
yeah. Thank you.
workforce. Like, you are a glue maker and a
Thanks.
relationship builder, and it's definitely
Yeah,
one of your superpowers.
yeah, yeah. I'll tell you a little story. When
Yeah.
I was a little kid, I don't know, this must have been like first, second grade. I went to this all Hispanic elementary school called El Sereno Elementary here in LA. And my class got invited to march in the Cinco de Mayo parade in LA. And so we learned this whole dance routine. And, they dressed me up in a poncho and a sombrero and, it's Cinco de Mayo. And I'm marching through the streets of LA, dancing my little ass off. So proud and having so much fun. And at the end of this parade, I get jumped by these kids who beat the living shit out of me. And the last thing I remember before, you know, passing out, puke all over me, was this kid pointing at me, yelling, "You're not Mexican," you know?
Mm.
And he wasn't wrong. I'm definitely not Mexican. And I think that, was that moment where there was this sense of being other. And, I think that when I saw the Olympics for the first time in LA, it wasn't that I wasn't Mexican, it was that I was an American, you know? And I was an American kid from, Los Angeles, California. And all of a sudden it, hit me. I think in the vein of what Pierre de Coubertin wanted out of the Olympic movement was that, maybe the Olympic movement is very much not a war, but a stand for peace, right? And that's the kind of great irony of that level of competition is
Yeah.
that it is, in my mind, an anti-war, anti-violence movement, right? Feeling
You
connected,
believe
feeling,
that is in now, decades later, with 2028 coming back to LA Olympics, and you're heavily involved with athletes and that whole program, creating luck, as you like to
yeah,
say, which
making
is a
luck.
little bit
Yeah,
more than that. Do you
yeah.
believe that we can still attain that vision of creating peace and connectivity?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ultimate goal, more so than ever. I think that we live in an age where people are really cynical about ideals, and I think that that is when you have to really lean into ideals. And I hope that the work towards 2028 is a stand for this idea that ideals matter, and that we're not going there to change our own lives in any manner, but we're going there to help change the lives of others. I think that's really the mandate, and that's why this is bigger than us, and for me, why it matters. And if that happens to be some sort of false belief, I think that for me it's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine to have that kind of faith.
So how, with the athletes that you are working with, and you were at the last Olympics as well, creating community in the USA Cycling Athlete House,
Yeah.
and your role there, what was your role there?
Uh, there were only really, two jobs: uh, put athletes on podiums or make luck. And so whenever I talked to any staff member and I asked them what they were doing, whether they were, I don't know, taking out the trash or filling water bottles, the only right answer was putting athletes on podiums. And if I talked to one of my chefs and they were chopping carrots and I asked them what they were making, the only right answer was that they were making luck. We were there to care. We were there to provide hospitality. We were there to nurture. Um, we were there to create a sense of safety and connection, because at this level of the game, these athletes are already the best in the world. And so all you need to do is create an environment where they can wholly be themselves, which are fierce competitors. And that was it. And that happens, I think, through first and foremost connection and looking out for all the little details of care. It's no different than just having an attentive grandma. And so in many ways, while people use the excuse of me being a sports scientist to help with a lot of the little incremental, marginal gains, the reality is that, I'm just there to be really caring, grandma. So sometimes science, sometimes grandma.
I can speak from personal experience. You're a really good grandmother.
Huh. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I consider you a brother, maybe more than a
Yeah.
grandmother.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I want to dive in a little bit to that. Yeah, you have, as you talked about earlier, you have, a doctorate, physiology, coach, all of these elite scientific, and your brain you're probably you are the smartest person I know, but you're
Ew.
also one of the most sensitive people that I know and emotionally intelligent people that I know. And so, I mean, you're almost a psychologist in many of these spaces, whether it's at Skratch Lab or with the Olympic athletes. So
Yeah.
where did that level of emotional intelligence and care come from?
I think for sure from my own family, from my own parents, there was a lot of struggle early on. We lived in this 1 bedroom apartment growing up with only one bed.
How many people?
Me, my brother, my mom, and dad. And I think that it's interesting because I reflect about how nurturing and secure that was to sleep in one bed with your whole family for much of your childhood. You know, that's a pretty powerful thing. And I remember one night it was really, really cold in Los Angeles, and my parents said, "Hey, let us warm up the bed first so that you guys aren't so cold." And I remember thinking to myself, like, I hate this. I hate that my parents have to be cold for us. And I think that I wanted from that point on to keep everyone in my life warm. I was really scared of the cold. Yeah. So,
The sleeping in the same bed, and I mean, that it's such an intimate, safe space, like you said,
yeah.
a little
Yeah.
cocoon.
Yeah.
I remember, I mean, a few years ago, we lost a mutual friend and a very good
Hmm.
friend of yours, Moriah
Yeah.
Wilson.
Yeah.
And you and I talked, to a brutal, brutal death and murder, and it was
Yeah.
horrific. And
Yeah.
you were really close with Mo, and you had introduced me to her, and like,
Hmm.
what an amazing light. And
Yeah.
we talked afterwards, and I think a mutual friend, you just said, I just want somebody to come sleep in my bed with me.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
one of your friends did
Yeah.
come to
Yeah.
sleep in your bed with you.
That's
And I
right.
wonder if that was a safety, sort of a familiar safety mechanism that you
Yeah,
employed.
absolutely. That friend was Caroline Treadway, and it was funny because Caroline and I had been friends for a long time. Caroline is an amazing storyteller and documentarian. She's the person behind the documentary Light. For those of you who are interested in rock climbing and sports in general, and Light is about eating disorders in rock climbing. It's
Oh,
an incredible, award-winning um, little story piece that Caroline did, and Caroline had just gotten engaged, but when she found out that Mo had died, she immediately just got on a plane and flew to Colorado and just showed up and said, "I'm taking care of you and whatever you need." And I remember her, um, us FaceTiming with her fiance in bed together. It was just so funny. And I was literally just like, thank you for letting me have Caroline for a little bit, you know? And she, literally like slept with me for, a few weeks until I could just manage myself. But it was that sense of friendship and security, and it helped me to redefine friendship, right? Um, in this most powerful way.
It
Yeah.
makes me think of uh, you are such a caregiver for everyone around you.
Mhm.
You you are a nurturer. You even self-admitted grandmother,
Yeah.
who is creating safety and community for everyone. And every time I see you, you smile, you give me a hug. Like that's just you. You are always supporting everyone else. So who supports you? Who supports that young boy and who's a man now, but who is
Yeah.
your safety network?
I think, in many ways, everyone in my life is. I think what people don't realize is that I don't work independently, even though, for example, I'm the quote unquote face of Skratch Labs. Um, every single employee that I have supports me and makes my life better. And I can't do anything I do without this really big team around me all the time. When we first started Skratch, I started getting really anxious when we were hiring more and more people and hearing things like, oh, yeah, my wife's pregnant and I'm pregnant or blah, 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 and more people and mouths to feed. And it's like this weight of responsibility can hit you and you feel like, oh, shit, like, how am I going to take care of all these people? What if I let them down? And then one day I realized that I was not taking care of them. They were taking care of me, right?
Mm.
The people who work at Skratch are literally every single day enriching me. And that's freaking crazy to think about, right?
What was the shift that made you, because I get the responsibility of building and supporting and growing, but what was the actual shift that like, no, they love me, and
Yeah.
how did that come about?
I think part of it was that in an organization where there are these really clear goals and where, you either making money or you're not making money and the scorecards are so clear. Uh, I realize how goofy I am. I realize like that a lot of what I'm good at is chasing after really shiny things and that I don't have a great attention span and I'm not really all that good at managing um, a business. I actually don't even really know anything about business, you know. Um, I clearly, I think very humbly suck at this. I mean, I'm trained as a sports scientist. What do I know about a P&L or margin or, all of the mechanics of finance or how the scale for the UPS machine thing works? Like, I don't know how to print a label. Like, ask me to ship out a box of Scratch. Like, yeah, like, no freaking way. Like, I don't even know how like the scanner thing works, you know? Um, So I realized really, really quickly how ignorant, how bad I was at all this sort of stuff and had to really trust others to take care of me in this process. But also realized that I had an impact around having a vision and I could have an impact around maybe setting a North Star about why we were doing what we were doing. And it seemed trivial to me, maybe in a lot of ways, that, all I had to do was tell people why
Yeah.
when I didn't know how. And
It's
then
very
it's that,
freeing to let go of trying to do it all yourself and just do the
yeah,
parts that you're good at.
yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
unusual for an entrepreneur to finally get to that place to be like, no, I'm the visionary, or I'm the finance, or I'm, especially in
Yeah.
small business when you're building, like
Yeah.
to let
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have to wear a lot of hats initially.
Hmm.
And every hat I ever wore, except for the hat of being myself and wanting to care for athletes, I, you know, wore fairly poorly. And up until that point, I think, everything I had done I felt like I was doing really well in. Like school was something I could, get a good grade in and have this feedback. Coaching, seeing athletes, win races, that was good feedback too. But business is freaking hard and it's not clear cut. And there aren't good answers for how you market or brand or do this or that. And you don't know why people, are re-clicking on that click button. Who
Yeah.
knows,
Yeah, it's not as clear. I find this in my work and my sport as well. And the sports, training for something is really quite linear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but to create a business or something
Yeah.
that hasn't been done before,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really isn't very linear and can be really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's also when you're onto something, when no one else has done it and there isn't a clear roadmap. And I think for us, we want to be trailblazers. We want to go somewhere that others have not trekked. And that's really fun. And there's adventure in that. And I think that that's what we're all looking for, is some level of adventure. But in every adventure, there are support teams and crews that
Mhm.
allow you to get there.
So is
That's
that
not
the
what,
key? I mean, adventure is really sexy, and people say to me,
yeah,
"Oh, that's amazing what you do," or they're giving you accolades for creating something that wasn't there before. But yet, in the middle of it, what people don't realize is you're in the jungle, with no machete, or you're, up shit creek with no paddle.
yeah,
Um,
like you were.
yeah,
Oh,
literally
yeah,
to
yeah.
go. But so what do you draw on in the super dark moments of an adventure where you really are lost?
Yeah. I don't know. I think that you have to draw on the tension. You have to draw on the contradiction. You have to draw on the fact that, um, you are really, really scared and you don't know what's going to happen, but you have to kind of keep on going and that everything is going to be okay. There is both this balance of, you know, as Rainer Maria Rilke said, beauty and terror all the time.
Mhm.
It's constantly about beauty and terror. So you get drawn in by some beauty, you get pushed back by some terror, and you hope that the net balance is that you can still step forward.
Do you think you need that total contradiction, beauty, terror, light, dark, sad, happy, like
Yeah.
grief, love? Do you need to have these separate things to appreciate the other?
I hate it. I wish that we didn't. I wish I could be in an internal state of bliss all the time. I don't know that we need it. I just know that it's impossible to avoid it. And
Yeah.
so at the end of the day, you have to just kind of surrender to it and accept it. And, you know, that also means that when you're happy, you have to accept that as well. And sometimes we get so beat down by the dark that we don't let ourselves be happy. We don't let ourselves really be joyful and be goofy and, you
So
know,
true.
dance and be playful. Um,
It's
so
so
I
I
think that,
two things I'm thinking about is in the dark places, and this is one of your superpowers is creating safety for people around you. And
yeah,
so that when someone is having a hard time, they have a safe place.
yeah,
But you got to create those communities when you're in the
yeah,
joyful place,
that's
when you
right.
are having dancing and having a party and everybody's happy, it creates a safe place for when it's needed.
Yeah,
Cultivating those relationships when things are good. It's almost like going to the weight room, doing the gym, doing the work to keep your body strong, because inevitably illness, injury, and ultimately death is going to come. And so
yeah,
if you're stronger, more resilient for those things,
yeah,
maybe
that's
it
right.
makes
That's
them a
right.
little bit easier.
That's right. One of my best experiences uh was having Nerf gun wars with the firefighters at the Boulder Rural Fire Department in Boulder. My good friend Shannon Silvendahl, who was a doctor for Garmin, is their medical director, and Bijou and I would go in and cook the meals at times, and we'd always end up in these like crazy Nerf gun wars, you know?
Mm.
And these are these like big, buff firefighter dudes, right? And just like a bunch of freaking kids like shooting each other with Nerf guns. And then all of a sudden they get a call and they're going to really dark places, you know? And it's was never lost upon me that contradiction of what they do.
Yeah, I mean, we need a release. I actually watched a video with your mom the other day, and I've been trying to return to play and like
Yeah.
been reflecting on, I've been a bit serious the last while.
Yeah.
For no apparent reason. Well, for lots of reasons of survival,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. Sure.
We get
sure.
serious when we're in threat and we need to survive. But I've been returning to memories of like, when was the last time I just played as a kid or played on my bike when I was young instead of having the bike be a job? It lost some of the play. And so I've really been thinking about playing lately, and I've stopped using my power meter right now. I've stopped using some of my metrics, which are really cool, but they were disrupting me wanting to return to play and judge. When we talk about scorecards, you're talking about scorecards and measuring success. I want to measure right now in like a feeling of joy of just moving.
Yeah.
Hey, Al, the dogs are barking. I'm going to just let them in and shut them up for a second. So hang on.
Okay.
All right. Play. We're talking about play.
Yes. We're talking about fair and ferocious play.
Yeah. And play can be competitive. Competition is fun. I actually remember some of the camps. You like to use a friend of ours, and you're training some athletes. You bring in a few people who are like fun at like competitive play and like sort of messing with the athletes and like
that's right.
Yeah, we're talking about Tim Johnson here, who's
exactly
a master of play,
getting under your skin, irritating the shit out of you.
He
Tim
does.
Johnson.
He's super irritating, but he's laughing the whole time, and
that's right.
So that you bring that into your coaching intentionally.
Absolutely. And Tim has been one of the most important individuals for me as I work with athletes, because he is so good at creating that playful environment. He's so good at having fun, and he's so good at just giving feedback and noticing things and really, really inspiring people in that play. And I think it does take a whole entire community around athletes. And Tim really came into the fold when I was helping Taylor Phinney prepare for the Olympics. And, the idea was that Taylor needed a punching bag and Tim was going to be the punching bag. But over the course of this like month of training for the Olympics, Tim just kept on getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And we're doing these like motor pacing lead out sprints on the peak to peak highway towards the end of the camp. And, Taylor starts winding it up, to take Tim out to the woodshed, and Tim just digs his heels in and starts coming around Taylor and then starts dropping Taylor in this sprint. And as Tim is dropping Taylor, I hear Taylor yell out, "God damn it, you waste of talent, Tim Johnson." And then Taylor ended up naming that segment, Tim Johnson, Waste of Talent.
Oh my gosh.
Which was so funny. But
he did the same kind of stuff with me at the Red Bull training camps, where he'd just be teasing me and poking me, and he'd get me really pissed off, and he'd just be laughing. And I wasn't able to play in those days.
Oh no. Yeah, but he was trying to coax you into it. He was trying to get you to,
I was just
to loosen up a little bit.
Frustrated and like.
Yeah, but that was a lesson in and of itself. And I think that's a lesson that Tim gets, is that you have to deal with how you get frustrated in training if you're going to handle that frustration in racing. And one of the reasons why Tim was such a great athlete was that in the midst of all of that pain and all of the chaos of, say, a cyclocross race, he still could think. He still had his wits about him.
Yeah.
He could still make decisions. He kept
How
clear-headed.
how are you playing? How does Al play?
Um,
Are you
I
playing?
think I think every time I get on the bicycle, it's about being goofy, and it's about attacking the crap out of athletes. This for me happens on an e-bike most of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
talk about having some fun when you're on this like extra 400-watt boosted Bosch electric bike, and you're just gonna like rally the crap out of someone. And um, for me, like for example, you're part of the mentoring team for Caroline Resin, and one of Caroline's weaknesses is her jump or her sprint. And so every time I see city sign, I sprint her. And I don't care if I like beat her by like miles, right? But I know she hates it. It's so frustrating. And for me, it's so funny. And I'm always laughing when I beat Caroline in a sprint. But
Uh,
I know this one day she's going to beat me, and it's going to be
yeah,
glorious.
and she'll be laughing.
And she'll be laughing. Yeah,
Oh.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
what are your scorecards that how do you score yourself? What are
Oh,
your
poorly.
scorecards?
Yeah, I think that, yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a feeling that I think we all have about how productive we are in a day. And there's also maybe the sentiment that, um, at least for me and many of the people I know, we're wired to only feel morale when we're productive.
Mhm.
And that kind of sucks too. And so for me, I think that I have a different number of scorecards. One scorecard I have is, you know, how many people did I interact with in a day? And I'll go through this mental checklist at the end of the day of like, how many people did I actually talk to? How many people did I actually help? How did my day lay out? And that can make me feel productive,
Mhm.
especially against the digital world that we live in, which is another scorecard. How many
Yeah,
emails did I actually answer today? And usually it's not many,
yeah.
and on the digital side of my life, there's been a lot of suffering because we're so inundated with so much information. And, like I've got a screen up on my computer where I have Slack and then WhatsApp and then iMessage and then Google Mail and then my Mac Mail account. And it's just like all like, right?
Mhm.
And if I just sit here and look at my screen, there are constantly messages coming in. And I could spend my whole entire day just like going from one app to another app answering, you know, all of these little things. And some days that actually is what happens. But I don't think that that's a good measure of how productive I am in a day. Um, so I try to bring it down to, did I actually have any good conversations today? Did I ride my bicycle today?
Mhm.
Um, did I scratch off at least one or two to dos? Um, but most importantly, I think that this is the hard one to remember. Did I have dinner with someone tonight?
Mhm.
Who did I have dinner with? And I keep this little training diary. And you've seen these spreadsheets, Reba, they're big, right? And the one that I keep for myself, the main thing that I track and keep notes of is, where did I have dinner and who did I have dinner with? What did I make for dinner that night?
Well, it's kind of the theme of, I mean, the Feed Zone Table cookbook.
Yeah,
Yes, it has a bunch of great recipes, but it's about building community by getting people to sit down at the table together and
yeah,
prepare and eat a meal.
yeah, yeah.
Does that come from your family?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was like the non-negotiable growing up as a kid. You had, no matter, my parents didn't have good optics on what my brother and I were doing when we were kids because they were so busy surviving. And
Mhm.
so they would effectively let us roam pretty free. We were free range kids for sure. They let us play a lot, but we had to be back home for dinner, and there was a lot of trust in that. I was
Yeah.
like, we'll let you do whatever the hell you want, manage yourselves, but you just have to be home for dinner. And the other side of it was that there was a lot of expectation around helping with that dinner. And so when my brother and I would get home from school, one of the responsibilities that we had was doing the mise en place for dinner. A mise en place is a French term, everything in its place, where you do all the prep work, the cutting, the laying all the ingredients out, cleaning the rice, chopping the vegetables, etc. And we would come home from school, and there would always be a voice message on the tape machine from my
Uh-huh.
mom. And it was basically a list of what needed to be meased for dinner. And so if my brother and I were efficient, we could quickly defrost the meat, quickly do the chopping, quickly, get all the things ready together. And then we could go play, ride our bikes, train, do our homework, whatever it was. My parents would get home, and if we did our job right, they could have dinner made and ready in 20 or 30 minutes in the time frame that it took to cook the rice, because they didn't have to do any of the mise en place. So that was a big lesson in life in terms of participating in that process.
And you live alone, right?
Yeah. Well, I live with my mom right now, today.
Okay. Well, for now, but you live in Boulder, right?
I live in Boulder. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
live in Boulder, you live
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
So it must feel sometimes hard to create this community that is so important to you.
Yeah. It's really, really hard. And I see it in my mom too. My dad passed in, almost 20 some odd years ago. So she's been on her own for a while. Uh, she's done a great job up until recently of really kind of maintaining that community as well. But as she lost her ability to drive, and as a lot of her friends began to pass, it's become harder and harder and harder. So I have effectively kind of moved back in with my mom, and spend a lot of time here in LA with her. But it's super, you need to be super intentional about it. And I think that in some ways you can't expect reciprocation from it. Like there was a time when I would get really bitter about how often I was cooking for other people. But really, it's not me giving the gift of a meal. It's them giving a gift of sharing that meal with me. And there's always this kind of paradigm shift. A different way of looking at things that makes it better. And the reality is yeah, it's a pain in the ass to do the shopping and get things together and try to make a meal for someone else. But the alternative is worse, I think. Even though I am an introvert and I do like to also just hang out by myself quite a bit, and pretty comfortable hanging out with myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think about bike rides. I love doing solo things, lots of long solo things, but I also, I live really remote and I miss sort of having people to ride with and
Yeah,
having
that's right.
people to do things with. So I've gone a little too far in one direction. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and it is hard to create community. Sometimes it feels like you are doing all the work,
Yeah.
like you said. I'm doing everything and what's coming back in return. So how do you fill a space, or if one light goes out, how do you light another? And that can be someone passing or leaving us, or it can be
Hmm.
like your mom, her ability to drive isn't there anymore. How do
Hmm.
we, and for me, I stopped riding my bike the last few years, with some
Mm.
concussion recovery, and I
Yeah.
lost a big part of me for a while. And I really struggled to find other ways that weren't my norm to create light.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you do that when what or what you're familiar with goes away?
Yeah. I think for me, my default has always been coaching,
Hmm.
right? It is the idea of going to where the help is needed. I think maybe it's a way that I avoid my own pain and ignore the shit that's going on in my own life to focus on somebody else's, kind of needs. Helps. It gets me out of myself and it creates some mutual purpose with another human being.
Hmm.
Um, that for me has always helped. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, you know, uh, as an integral part of somebody else's life. And maybe that's all we can really ask for is that type of kinship, or what Kurt Vonnegut called a karas, people tied in a mutual purpose or goal. And in
Hmm.
that mutual purpose or goal, we find our kinship, we find our bonds. Otherwise, I'm just not good enough at small talk to keep a conversation going if we're not
Me
plotting or
neither.
planning. Like, so here's the deal, Reba. Like, if it really gets bad for us at some point, what we got to do is plan a diamond heist, like a
Okay.
legitimate full on heist, maybe of the
Or
Louvre.
yeah. Or we
Yeah.
plan our ride to the oldest Chinese restaurant in
Yes. Butte,
America.
Montana.
We keep
Yeah.
talking about planning an adventure to go ride there.
That's right. That's right.
But
But that's the
yeah,
whole thing, right? We gotta plan our own heist.
right. Plan our own
Yeah.
heist.
Yeah.
It makes me think about what all the planning and everything that's going into to circle back to the Olympics and
Yeah.
2028
Yeah.
and the ultimate goal is to win medals, but
Yeah.
really that isn't it.
That's not it. And I was reflecting upon just this week of all the athletes I've coached who come out of the games really, really depressed and really
Mhm,
sad and
mhm.
not feeling like they were able to win or accomplish things. So I started writing this little note to the athletes and staff that I might be hopefully working with in 2028 about why we're there. You want me to read it to you? This is kind
Yes,
of a work in progress,
please.
but it was kind of like I just started writing this thing. Like this is what I want to tell them before. Okay, I'm gonna read you this.
Well,
Okay.
we'll set the stage. They're like, it's high stakes. It's their career, their
Yeah.
job. They put
Yeah.
everything into it for decades, and it is kind of, if you're not first, you're last sort of
Yeah.
a mentality. And this high pressure, high stakes at the elite
Yeah.
level. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I would love you to read that for us.
Okay. Here's what I've got so far. For the athletes and staff who have the privilege of participating in the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles, there is only one truth. The Olympic Games will not change our lives. That is not why we are here. The hard and painful work, the belief and the doubt, and the relationships, lost and gained, that have been part of this journey have already transformed us and made us better. Our job now is to simply be who we have become. And by being ourselves, we will change the lives of others. From the 11-year-old kid in the side of the road to every person watching the events, we will be their spark. A spark for human dignity, for sport practiced without discrimination, for mutual understanding, for solidarity, for fair and ferocious play, and for the joy found in effort. Our why is to inspire a generation, to put athletes on podiums, to step on the podium, and to create permanence. Historic performances that leave a legacy so strong that U.S. cycling emerges forever secure and enduring. A lighthouse with safe, intangible harbors for anyone who has ever pedaled and who will ever pedal in the pursuit of excellence.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't this just make everyone listening want to go ride a bike and be a lighthouse and be a spark and be who we have already
Yeah.
become?
Yeah.
I love that. There's so much striving to be more, to do more, and look, this is who we have become
Yeah. Just
right
be yourself.
here
Everything's
and
going to
right
be
now.
okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not going to change our lives. It's the journey that has already changed us, right? And like if you expect that something that big, if you expect to go to some event like Leadville, for example, and you expect that that's going to change your life, you're wrong. I think what participating does is it changes the lives of all those people who have been part of that journey with you. It inspires people, and if you can be inspired, you can inspire others, and that's that's the hope. That's what we maybe could give. Otherwise, it win or lose, like fuck. It just it can be really, really hard to have like these hard lines when the reality of winning is so minute, right? It's a low probability game.
Winning in one definition of the word,
Yeah,
while there are infinite definitions of
yeah,
winning.
yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah.
winning to you right now in this moment looks like what?
Getting to pee whenever I feel like peeing.
Okay.
Like there's this weird thing where like I'm always so busy that like I'm always holding it in, and I'm like, I can't, I gotta do this other thing first, or I gotta finish this meeting, and I'm like needing to pee. But like to have that freedom of just like, hey guys, peace, I gotta go piss right now, and I don't know. I mean, it's
So
trivial,
the
right?
time,
The
having
gift of
some
time. Yeah,
freedom and
exactly.
flexibility.
Yeah, and to not always feel like you're holding back, if you will, right? Um, let's all just bask in the afterglow, you know?
Of
Um,
that feeling,
yeah, yeah, exactly. You
this
know,
is okay. So, I mean, what an interesting arc in this conversation.
yeah,
I
we
love
got to
it.
give ourselves relief, and this is where
Yeah,
like comedy is so interesting, especially dark comedy, because it works if that comic is willing to give the audience relief and let them off the hook. And this is where our friend Chef Bijou Thomas is so good, because he builds up some pretty dark shit sometimes. And then he just lets you off the hook and you feel so much better, and it's hilarious.
relief. I mean, I'm gonna think of that image now
Yeah.
of you always finally getting to go pee and going,
Yeah.
ah.
Yeah. Nobody needs to code brown, Reba, you
Okay,
know?
so since this is called What's the Rush, and we're on this topic of what are you holding back or letting go of,
Yeah.
um, is there something besides needing to urinate and wanting to have the freedom to go? Is there something else in your life that you're trying to release or slow down? And I'm hearing you talk about time,
Yeah.
creating
Yeah.
space, but can you articulate what you might be trying to shed or
Yeah.
or create in your life right now that feels like it
Yeah. I think
might need
in all of this pursuit and all of this ambition, the most difficult thing for me that I'm always thinking about and maybe trying to remind myself of is that what I have is enough,
it.
that I don't need more, right? And that's in all facets of life, whether that is, time or money or love or whatever it is, right? Like, you know, there was this maybe kind of high school desperation that I still continuously experience around like, oh, look at me. I need attention. I need love. I need someone to tell me that I'm great. And then all of a sudden you just kind of settle down and relax and say, hey, what I have is enough. And by not being anxious about all those things we want, we ironically get those things,
Mm.
you know? So I think that's the hard part, is just saying, hey, what I have is enough.
And letting go of the pursuit of that
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And, ironically, it's what allows you to get up every day and to do it again. And this was for me, I think, a lesson I'm always learning. I'm continuously learning over and over again. But, it really started with, my parents when I was in graduate school and really having a difficult time with school and feeling like it was never going to end. And I remember walking across the University of Colorado campus, at midnight from the laboratory one day with like a backpack full of like all of these books and journals and things that I had to get through. And just the weight on my back was so fucking terrible.
Oh,
And I got home that night and, you know, I ended up calling my parents, and it was pretty late for them as well. So they were, I think, a bit concerned. And I was just like, look, I can't do this anymore. I want to quit.
mm,
And they basically said, that's perfectly fine. Yeah. Come home. You can do this or that or the other. It doesn't matter. It's all good. If you don't want to do this, if it's too hard, whatever, like it's fine. You can quit. And they gave me permission. And I went to bed that night so freaking relieved. Like,
wow.
oh, because I think one of the biggest fears about quitting something like that is letting your family down, letting your parents down. At least
Yeah.
that was my fear, especially parents who had, you know, uh, a lot of education and were, had kind of reached the highest academic levels. So, having that permission, I slept like a little baby that night. I mean, I was just like, "Ugh, so good. And I woke up refreshed for the first time in a long time. And waking up refreshed, I was like, I'll just go one more day. And I went
Mm,
one more day. And then, by the end of that day, I was again exhausted. I called my parents and I told them, yeah, I'm going to quit. I'm quitting. And they said, okay. And I slept like a little baby. And then I went one more day. And what happened was I quit every single night for the rest of grad school until I got my PhD. And then they kicked me out. I didn't have any more to do, you know?
What a beautiful story of acceptance and your parents creating a safe space again and saying, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, you didn't need a kick in the ass. You were already
No.
kicking yourself in the ass.
Yeah.
You just needed to be given a hug and said, sure, whatever you need.
Yeah. It's okay. Like, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's fine. And
I
I think
think,
that it's that I try to bring to the coaching. It's like I can see these athletes wanting it. I don't need to kick their ass. I mean, I can be candid with them. I can point when I want or need their behavior to be different, but it's up to them at the end of the day. And the expectation is that they're all sentient, free-willed individuals who can make their own decisions about what they want in life.
I think the real takeaway for me there is that we are our worst enemy often, and so hard on ourselves. And if we have a supportive team around us, someone else can be a mirror and
Yeah,
provide what we can't provide for ourselves in that moment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're all just a reflection,
Yeah.
you know.
I
Yeah.
mean, you are a beautiful mirror for me. I've called you many
Oh,
times during dark moments, during happy moments as well. We
yeah,
share little silly phone texts here. So, I mean, you are such a gift to me and to the world.
yeah, yeah.
And there's so much more insight from books you've read and all that, but we're gonna have to save that for another time. I guess as we close out, what is you're so well read. What is one book that you keep returning to again and again?
Oh, geez. You know, I think consistently, at least when it comes to trying to run and manage a business and trying to work with young athletes who are in, this kind of pursuit of greatness, um, I return back to two maybe documents or books. One is the 15 Commitments to Conscious Leadership, which is a great book about, you know, how do you be a kind of wholehearted leader even when like you may not even see the impact that you have as a leader, or maybe you're not choosing to be a leader, because I haven't really ever seen myself that way, but I've learned to be a leader by being just myself, and by not being embarrassed about talking out loud, right? That for me is the crux of leadership, is not being afraid or embarrassed to talk out loud. Because I'm always thinking about stuff. Like shit's always on my mind,
Mhm.
and knowing how to express that, knowing when to express that, especially when others are having a hard time articulating the mood or the issue. That can be really, really powerful. And the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership is a really great book to that end. And then there is the Zingerman's Guide to Building a Great Business. And in their first book, there's a chapter called How to Write a Vision of Greatness.
Mm.
And every athlete that we sponsor at Skratch Labs and every athlete that I coach, I make them read this chapter and I make them write a vision of greatness
Mhm.
before I start working with them, because I want to clearly know what they want and the picture that they see in their mind over time, so that I can be on the same page and we can be on the same page. And that when things get really dark and really hard, we can read that vision and reorient and, find our way again, see where we are on the map.
And the exercise for you, but not just for you, but for them to actually articulate their
Yeah.
vision is really
So hard. Yeah.
hard.
If you have to say it out loud, and then you have to say it out loud to other people. And if you can't do that, it's never going to happen. You can't pursue these things, I think, in silence or alone. It's
Have
too
you done
hard.
this exercise for yourself recently?
Yeah, and I think in part that's kind of what I was getting at when I was writing this statement about like, well, what do I want to tell these athletes if I am lucky enough to be back at the games in 2028, you know? Like what
Yeah,
is the thing that I want them to know that I'm after myself, Like
right.
how do I live with myself if all we do is lose? But how do I live with myself if all we do is win? But if I become the most raging asshole you've ever met, Reba, all I
That's not
do is win, win, win. Yeah.
that's not going to happen. Happen. I mean, we started this when we were chit-chatting before. You said you've never done a podcast with somebody that you said you love before.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you, I
I
love
love
you.
you, Reba.
I love
I
you
love you
too.
too. Yeah.
Spreading
Yeah.
love and safety and joy and play around
Yeah.
the world through bicycles. It's a good
Yeah.
thing.
It's a good thing. Yeah, it's a really good thing. It is ultimately, this toy that we've all grown up with, right? Yeah, and it's neat when something can be a toy and a tool.
Toy and a tool of the bicycle.
Yeah, yeah. Woo! Yeah,
Woo!
Reba, how about you? What's your
We
vision of greatness
let's see.
before we
Um,
go?
before we go, my vision of greatness is partly reflected in this new podcast adventure, and my recent purpose statement that I helped with the help of a class with Dr. Michael Gervais, who I think you
Yeah,
might know who
yeah,
he is, sports
yeah,
psychologist. I went to through one of his classes, and it's about exploration and invitation for people to explore without and within,
yeah.
or within and without of, I've been an external explorer a lot of my life, but we're sort of combining it all
Oh,
together. So exploring and learning and curiosity, like you said, of what
yeah,
what can we all learn together. And so
yeah.
I appreciate you being on this adventure with me.
Woo! I'm
Woo!
excited too. Yeah, here's what I want to do. In the words of Chang Ray Lee from the book Native Speaker, I want to carve at your inner ore and I want to use it to flame your most secret. I want to use it to fuel the flame of your most secret vanity.
Wait, say that again. I gotta
Uh,
wrap my head around this.
okay. Here's what we're going to do, Reba. We're going to carve at your inner ore and we're going to use that to fuel the flame of your most secret vanity.
Oh, oh,
Yeah. So what is your secret vanity?
my secret vanity. I don't know. That doesn't sound
The
good.
secret vanity in my mind is the thing that you dream about but are not yet ready to tell others because you might be
Oh,
embarrassed
okay.
that it's vain or shallow.
Vanity can have a little negative connotation, but
Yeah.
you're right. Your
Yeah.
secret dreams,
Yeah.
really.
And it's weird when there can be some shame around our dreams. And
Mm-hmm.
it's this idea to not let that happen. Don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed of what you really want. Stop calling it a vanity. Don't let it be a secret.
All right.
Dig
Well,
into
I'll just
yourself.
say right here and right now, I want to be a light for people.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, you are.
that's vanity.
Yeah,
And
no. Keep on being the light. Keep on being the lighthouse. I think that, there's this recently watched this little film about Kai Leitner, rock climber, and he said, sometimes you don't get to choose our lighthouses.
mm,
And I think that sometimes too, in your case, Reba, you don't often get to choose to be a lighthouse, but you are. You always have been. And so the fact that you can say that out loud now, express who you really are, it's pretty fucking awesome.
thank you. It felt good to say that. I
Yeah,
appreciate you giving that
yeah,
gift to me.
yeah, yeah. No problem.
Hey, it's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.